American evangelist D.L. Moody said, "I've had more trouble with myself than any other man." I took his words and turned them into my mantra that helped me guide my turbulent journey of recovery and transformation. That journey began on January 19th, 1995, when I woke up as a successful trial attorney. Yet behind this facade of achievement lay a darker truth. Driven by my ego, my arrogance, my sense of entitlement, I had strayed far from the path of integrity. A mere 8 hours later, my comfortable life collapsed around me as I was indicted by a federal grand jury on 33 counts of corruption. And I was guilty of committing every one of those crimes. 10 months and 2 trials later, I was sentenced to imprisonment for 7 years. When I went to prison, I left my family financially destitute. I had spent all of our savings, my 2 sons' college education funds, and put a second mortgage on our home, all in the failed attempt to not to go to prison for the crimes I'd committed. But what was even worse was how emotionally devastated they were when they and everyone they knew realized I was a criminal. It is a miracle that my family survived my destructive behavior, and a testament to the resilience of my wife, Deborah. When I went to prison, I spent the first 2 years engaged in revenge fantasy. I incessantly plotted how I was going to get even for all those people who had put me in prison. My ego and my self-image prevented me from seeing that I was the one that had caused the devastation to those I loved. I continued to see myself as a victim, not the cause of my incarceration or the destruction of my personal and professional life. However, in the second half of that second year, an event occurred that forced me to face reality. I began to see the men I'd seen released from prison return to prison. That's when I discovered that 70% of all prisoners return to prison within 5 years after they are released from incarceration. This forced me to realize that if I did not change who I was or how I behaved, not only was I going to lose my family, but I could potentially spend most of my life in prison. In that moment of unfiltered clarity, my carefully constructed self-image of being the toughest and smartest guy in every room shattered into 1,000 pieces. But as traumatic as this event was for me, I realized that it gave me the opportunity to become a different person. A person who would no longer be defined by a toxic self-image that required so much destructive behavior to maintain. And with that realization, I began my journey of transformation from the person I was to the person I wanted to become. The first step of that journey required that I accept the truth that I and I alone was responsible for the devastation that I'd caused myself and others. And this was extraordinarily difficult for me. I'd spent decades creating an ego that strongly resisted accepting any responsibility for my toxic self-destructive behavior. But I also realized if I could not overcome this and accept this truth, I could not move on in my journey of transformation. Because of this, I engaged in relentless self-reflection, finally forcing my ego to acknowledge the destruction that it has caused and to accept responsibility for that destruction. Immediately after accepting that responsibility, I was overwhelmed by a flood of grief, of guilt, of regret for the pain that I had caused my family. I also knew that I had to move forward if I were going to become a better person. And I decided that I was going to take that pain and that despair that I felt and turn it into constructive energy that would fuel that journey of transformation, that would make me more resilient and more capable of overcoming the inevitable challenges I was going to face on that journey. With that understanding and that acceptance of that despair and that pain, I decided that I would now meet with my wife and 2 sons to ask them for forgiveness, to ask them to let me remain a member of our family, and to ask them to support me on my journey of transformation. And thank God they agreed to do so. With their unwavering support, I was able to make the determination to commit to doing the hard things that would be required of me on this journey of transformation so that I could become a better husband, a better father, and a better person. And I hope that you never have to recover from a devastating setback like I did. But I know that as much as we want to avoid adversities and setbacks, they are unavoidable in our life. The question is not trying to avoid the unavoidable, but to become better able to recover from those setbacks and adversities and strengthen ourselves so that we become more resilient and more capable of overcoming setbacks and adversities that are going to present themselves because life is an unpredictable future. The best part about this is resilience is a skill set. And because it's a skill set, we can choose, if we're prepared to do the hard things, to become more resilient. But becoming resilient is not easy. It requires that we step outside of our comfort zone and agree to do those difficult and often painful things so that we can become more resilient and be able to face the future in a more positive fashion. I believe that there are 4 commitments that everyone who wants to become more resilient must make. The first commitment is we must accept responsibility. Even if you don't believe you bear any responsibility for a setback or adversity that you are facing, you need the time to reflect, to make sure that this is true. Because your ego and your self-image often will hide this responsibility from you. And if you discover that through your actions or inactions, you are responsible for some portion or all of this setback or adversity, you must own that. Accept that responsibility. Because if you don't, you cannot move forward and become more resilient. The second commitment is you cannot change the past. As much as you would want to change the past, it can't be changed. What we have to do is accept that fact, make amends, Apologize for that destructive behavior that's caused pain and harm to others. But accept it and take that acceptance and turn it into moving forward. With that apology and making sure that your destructive behavior no longer dictates who you are, you will be able to move on. The third commitment is we have to learn. We have to learn from our past mistakes, because that's what will give us the information necessary so we can become stronger, so we can become more resilient. And as we face new setbacks and new adversities, because we will, we have to change our perspective from why is this happening to me, to ask, what can I learn from this? The final commitment is you must recognize that becoming more resilient is not a solo journey. Without the support of those who love you and want you to succeed, it is too difficult for you to complete that journey. And often, those people who can offer you the most support and the most love are those you've injured, are those you've harmed. But you must accept them because they want to help you. You must seek and ask for and offer appreciation for their support. I am eternally grateful for the opportunity I had for redemption, the opportunity to once again walk a path of integrity. All I can tell you is that I take this opportunity to share my story in the hopes that other people will learn from my mistakes and be able to avoid the pain and despair that can continue for years. As I stand here once again reflecting on my journey of transformation, all I can tell you is how lucky am I. Thank you.